So don't go anywhere. It'll be Oliver Eskolin versus Thomas Gravouille.
Yeah, it's still going to be a very, very good match. I believe both of them were 8-1.
Yeah.
So still in a very good position to be able to make it into that top 8, because the more wins you have on the day one, that will mean you face opponents that also have higher ratings or higher scores as well, so that will help your resistance, which will hopefully help you into that top cut if you only manage to get those 11 wins. I say only. 11 is still a fantastic amount. 12 does guarantee it. 11 will be a little bit shaky, so obviously you want that extra help. And the fact that you've gone 8-1 means you're facing an opposing 8-1 on the first round, which means you've got a stronger in terms of score opponent. So that's really going to help you. Yeah,
real tongue twisters you were throwing out there, Jamie, and well handled with them. Yeah, you go 8-1 and you face a pony. It's a weird twist to Pokemon VGC this season. No, face your opponent's team. So, Jamie, you called out the Choice Band Dragonite as your favourite from yesterday. Other things yesterday that caught your eye? Other things you thought were really cool? We mentioned the Salamence. Or any crucial clutch matches or turns?
I think there was a couple. I think the misses on the rock slides and then respectively the air slash on the other ones were very good, because the play at the extreme speed to break the Talonflame Gale Wings was really cool, but then the rock slide missing just was really unfortunate, because that was such a fantastic play. So I'm sure we're going to see some other fantastic plays as we look at our players here. We have Oliver Eskolin on the left for you and Thomas Gravouille on the right. So two very, very strong players, and I'm very excited to be featuring this game.
Oh, very excited indeed. They're looking stern and ready. They're looking well rested, and we'll shortly be able to have a look at their teams and their achievements just to show what these players are capable of and the sorts of Pokemon they're running. Of course, we know that Thomas Gravouille often has his little Shedinja plushie on the table. He doesn't seem to right now, and of course, thankfully, Shedinja is not a Pokemon that we've seen so far in Generation
I'm very, very pleased it is not available, because Shedinja with the Terra Phenomenon? No, thank you. That would be something to face indeed, but yes. We are going to be able to see what they are going to be running here. It look like Tomat is still going to be running that Roaring Moon with a very defensive set. It's going to be no Tailwinds, not even. It's still going to be the defensive one with the safety goggles instead, with the Breaking Swipe. But Jawlock, Breaking Swipe, and Roost is going to be the moves of choice for the Roaring Moon. Very, very interesting set for sure.
Yeah, a very support-orientated, and we saw Thomas giving a cheeky wink to the camera as we were talking about Shedinja. Does he have a surprise up his sleeve? He's found a way to get Shedinja into the game. I don't think so. Oliver Eskolin, meanwhile, giving us a nice thumbs up there. They, feeling relaxed, hopefully, and ready to get into a game. And how exciting for them both to be playing each other. Such mutual respect for very high-ranked players.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, really good to see players of this caliber on their game as well. Yeah. They've had some great results recently as well. You can see there the results. We've got the runner-up in EUIC back in the last season for Oliver Eskolin. You've got a regional championship for Thomas back in the last season as well. So they're coming off some great results and really going to be able to follow their momentum.
Yeah, and then such recent results as well for Oliver, going from 2022 to 2019, and Thomas from 2023 to 2022. And these are obviously only the 4 that we're featuring. I'm sure they have plenty more under their belts as well. It's interesting to see that Oliver was top 4 of the Lille Special event in 2019, whereas Thomas, of course, won it in 2022. So some definite pairings going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. And one that is not featured there, Oliver did win the International Championships back in the senior division as well. So, yeah, really, really strong players coming out for both of these. You can see that they are starting to get ready for their match, because they have swapped their team sheets. So they are now aware of what their opponents are going to be bringing.
That's right, and shortly we'll be getting into those team sheets. And yeah, you were mentioning Thomas's Roaring Moon. On Oliver's side, there isn't a Roaring Moon, but there is a responding Dragon type in that Dragonite. And you know what? It's running that Choice Band, as we saw yesterday. Is this going to tear through Thomas's team, as Choice Band Dragonite did for Leonardo Bananomi yesterday?
Yeah, there wasn't really anything that Arash could do to stop that Choice Band, so we'll have to see if Tomat is going to be able to do that with the team that they are bringing. You've got the Roaring Moon, at least, that can Breaking Swipe down the Dragonites. That will reduce the damage somewhat, but you still don't really want to be taking a Terra Blast from the Dragonite, even if you've got it down to -1, because then it would be effectively back down to neutral to cancel the Choice Band out.
Yeah, and not only that, but as we can see now on Oliver's team, there's that Brute Bonnet, which can threaten with not only priority moves in that Sucker Punch, but also Spores. Could render a Pokemon on Thomas's side of the field completely useless for a few turns. So you've got the offensive pressure as well as more support orientation.
Yeah, absolutely, and it seems like something is picking up on that Brute Bonnet. You very often see either Bullet Seed with loaded ice, or Seed Bomb as a way of hitting with grass-type coverage. But there's been multiple Brute Bonnets that have opted for both Crunch and Sucker Punch and just no grass coverage at all. It's very, very interesting to see that. It's maybe a meta adaptation that is going forwards, because it has happened multiple times on this stream where we've seen the double dark on the Brute Bonnet. Because you've got the double dark on the King Gambit, that's expected, because it's got the space to run it. When you almost certainly run an Assault Vest on it, you get the Sucker Punch for priority, or you get the extra damage and just not worrying about, oh, I've Sucker Punched into a status move, with either Kowtow Cleave or Assurance in this case for the King Gambit as well.
Absolutely. It's we saw a nice little wave there to the camera from Oliver, and perhaps the dropping of the grass type move on Brute Bonnet is something to do with the fact that Dondozo is not quite so prevalent in this meta. You do have Iron Bundle, but given that Brute Bonnet is weak to ice moves coming out from the Iron Bundle, perhaps trainers are thinking, well, I have something else in the back that can deal with Iron Bundle. We want to keep Brute Bonnet for something that isn't super effective against it. As very shortly, we'll be getting Thomas Gravouille's team sheet up on screen and seeing how that compares with that support-orientated Roaring Moon that you were talking about. With Roost, of course, being able to recover its HP. And looking at Oliver's team, I'm not sure there is Pokemon that can do that, but there it is. That doesn't seem to be Thomas's team. Oh no, yes it is.
Yes.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no,
it
we've
is.
got the Roaring Moon.
We've got Roaring Moon there with the Roost, and yeah, it's fantastic to see a Corviknight. That's partly what threw me off. I thought, wow, would it really be a Corviknight here in day 2? But here it is. Absolutely, I know a certain Discord server that will be delighted to see that Corviknight up on screen. And Corviknight is a Pokemon that's been seeing plenty of action, perhaps more than we have expected in recent events.
Yeah, it's been able to make finals of both an international and a regional so far this season, so it's definitely still going to be a strong pick going into this. We've still got that Gamora that is picking up in popularity with that Assault Vest and the Mortal Spin that was very, very impactful in one of our previous day 1 matches. So yeah, really, really picking up in the meta for that. It just depends on what kind of other moves you get for your coverage, because there's there's 5 moves that you want on the Gamora, and obviously you can only pick 4. So dropping one of them for Mortal Spin ends up being Energy Ball in this case on that Gamora for Thomas. So no grass moves for either of these Pokemon. Gamora would like to run the Energy Ball. Brute Bonnet on Oliver's team would have liked to run Bullet Seed or the Seed Bomb, but no grass coverage here.
No grass coverage at all. Well, we have the Energy Ball on the Flutter main, but yeah, that's a really interesting team to see from Thomas. And yeah, Glimora was such a threat yesterday. And we'll have to see if it remains a threat from Thomas's team today, as these players will shortly be getting into the game. It's really cool to see Mirror Armor on that Corviknight as well, showing why it's such a strong pick at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got the Arcanine on Oliver's team, so if you do switch in that Arcanine to try and intimidate the opponent, then Corviknight will reflect that back. And then Arcanine will receive the -1 instead of the Corviknight. So that will help it out really a lot against the opposing Arcanine, because it would have liked to go for the Flare Blitzes to do some good damage, but it won't be doing as much damage with that Mirror Armor.
And getting into turn 1 now of our first game, we have Fluttermane and Brute Bonnet for Oliver, and Glimora and Palafin for Thomas Gravouille.
Yeah, so you've led with the Palafin on Thomas' side of the field because you do want to be switching that out as soon as possible so you can get it into its hero form to get those extra stats, extra defenses and extra damage as well. But you do have to contend with the fact that you can just go for a Sport with the Brute Bonnet. You can go for a Sludge Bomb into the Brute Bonnet. That would do some very good damage. It would not pick up the KO though. Brute Bonnet is incredibly bulky. Glimora going for the more supportive set with the Assault Vest won't be doing the damage it needs. So something is likely to be going to sleep today.
Something is likely to be going to sleep. Will it be going into that Palafin? It has just protected, so it wouldn't have any effect if it was. We see the Moonblast going into the Palafin, which has of course just protected. Mortal Spin coming out from Glimora into Brute Bonnet and Fluttermane. It's super effective on the Brute Bonnet, but of course this is not a move that wants to deal a massive amount of damage. It's just to get that poison chip going, as we do see a Spore coming out from Brute Bonnet into Glimora. So one could argue that it's done part of its job already, having poisoned both of Oliver's Pokemon, but it will be taking some sleep now.
Yeah, absolutely. So trading the poisons for the sleep, we'll have to see if that is going to be a good trade for either of these players. The poison is going to start to rack up for sure, but now Glimora, it can't go for any of the other attacks. It can't go for a Sludge Bomb into the Brute Bonnet, so you can very safely Spore that Palafin slot. It likely wants to switch out, and that could be into the Roaring Moon, that's the Pokemon with the safety goals that would like to take the Spore, but you can just go for a Moonblast into that slot as well, and that would cover it for it very nicely. So once again, this Brute Bonnet is looking in a very, very strong position indeed.
A very strong position as Palafin does switch out, and instead for Thomas, it is the Corviknight coming in. So potentially it will be taking a Spore. Instead it takes a Moonblast, which it can do much better, but that's still a great amount of damage. As Glimmora takes its mandatory turn of sleep, I'm thrilled to see this Corviknight here, seeing what it can do, but won't be doing anything for the time being as Corviknight does get put to sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got some good damage on the Corviknight, but the poison is going to really start racking up here. You can see about a third of the HP of the both Pokemon are already gone at this point. At least you're not going to be taking any Brave Birds from the Corviknight, but Glimmora can be waking up at this point. You can still get the Sludge Bombs into the Brute Bonnet. After all those poison ticks, Sludge Bomb is probably going to be strong enough to KO the Brute Bonnet now, so that would be able to put a stop to all those spores. So taking a little bit of a slower approach on this initial couple of turns, because you're just letting the poison rack up, and maybe hoping that after all the poison, the Palafin waiting in the back now would be able to clean up.
And Palafin is known for cleaning up. As Thomas, frustrating for him, he has to watch both of his Pokemon having a nap, and he's just hoping that one of them wakes up soon, as Brute Bonnet is able to go for a crunch, a neutral hit now, of course, which activates Corviknight's Berry, but good damage coming out onto that Corviknight. It's still now on about 2/3 of his health, as we see the poison rack up for Brute Bonnet. Of course, Kingambit is not a Pokemon that can be poisoned.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the poison really coming into play. It's now almost half damage that's been done to the opposing Brute Bonnet. 2 turns of sleep have been used up on the Glimmora, so it's more likely to wake up this turn, and Corviknight has already taken a turn of sleep. That can also go for the wake up. It's interesting to see Oliver being avoiding attacking that Glimmora with the Brute Bonnets, because if you do attack it with a physical move, there is the Toxic Debris, and suddenly everything else can be poisoned. 2 Pokemon are already poisoned, one of them is immune, so it really would be for the Pokemon that's just waiting in the back. If it's the Dragonite, that wouldn't be too much of a concern, because that would be off the ground. But if it's either the other Pokemon, then you probably won't be wanting to attack this Glimmora to try and activate that debris.
But as it is, Glimmora does manage to wake up and take out that Brute Bonnet. And it just goes to show how much of a threat Glimmora can be, even when it's asleep. You still don't want to touch it, that hot potato Pokemon. But Corviknight remains asleep. Kingambit goes for an Assurance. Of course, that won't be dealing as much damage because Brute Bonnet went down before it could get its crunch off.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, avoiding the Glimmora, that was a potential to go for an Iron Head. That might have picked up the KO on Glimmora. It's pretty bulky, but Kingambit is incredibly strong as well. But still avoiding activating that Toxic Debris. You've got the Arcanine waiting in the back that we do get the sneak peek of, so you don't want to get the poison on that for sure. In comes the Fluttermane, so that can threaten some very good damage onto either Pokemon. You'd almost certainly want to be locking into Shadow Ball, because that would be a neutral hit on both Pokemon. Fairy would not be the move of choice here for sure. Corviknight's definitely in range of a Spec Shadow Ball. Glimmora with that Assault Vest is still going to be able to shrug it off quite nicely. You'd be able to put it in range of Iron Head for sure if you do go for that attack, but then you'd be ignoring the Corviknight that could be setting up a Tailwind to allow your Pokemon to be able to outspeed the Fluttermane in the future as well. Or you could just go for an immediate Brave Bird. The poison ticks on the Fluttermane probably has put it in range of the Brave Bird because its defense is so frail. It's probably going to be quite bulky, given that it's the choice specs, and we've seen that players have been opting to run their choice spec Fluttermane's very bulky, but then even if it doesn't pick up the KO, there's still what the poison is for. You just miss the KO, but then suddenly poison is enough to be able to pick up the KO as well, so Fluttermane really has to do some massive damage here.
And let's see if it does, as Shadow Ball comes out from Fluttermane into Corviknight, and it does pick up the knockout. So unfortunately, this Corviknight has not been able to provide much at all for Thomas. Let's hope it might do in a subsequent game, as Earth Power hit Kingambit from Glimmora, taking away about a third of its health. It took that really quite well, all things considered. And Iron Head is enough for the one-hit knockout, or knockout onto Glimmora with a critical hit, which may well have mattered, but of course we have this initial layer of Toxic Debris. Because it's just the one, any Pokemon coming in will just be singly poisoned, so to speak. It won't be a bad poison.
Yeah, so that'll be the Arcanine that's waiting in the back, but the poison is still going on that Fluttermane, almost down to half HP. That's definitely in range of Jet Punch. So the fact that you've got the Arcanine waiting in the back, you'd want to intimidate this Palafin that's going to be coming in, because it's now in its hero form. It's going to do some absolutely massive damage, but then you'll be switching in on a Jet Punch, which would not be what you want to be doing at all. Fluttermane is the other Pokemon waiting in the back for Thomas, so that's going to be able to do some very nice damage indeed as well. But it is just a very free Jet Punch into the slot of the opposing Fluttermane, because its defenses are so bad that it's probably going to be taking all the damage to get the knockouts. The Arcanine does not want to be switching in either as well, but we have seen that the Terra Water is actually available on this Fluttermane. Will that allow it to survive a Jet Punch from a Palafin? That is going to be a big question here if it does decide to stay in, because a very interesting type on the Fluttermane. Water is incredibly uncommon. It's usually the Steel that you want to be going for as a defensive Terra type on the Fluttermane, but Water is also a very good defensive type as well, and could very much come into play here. It will depend on the speed interactions of both Fluttermanes as well. It just depends on how much you commit to training your speed on the Fluttermanes, because you want to be doing the massive damage, you want the bulk, but how much do you invest in the speed to try and catch the opposing Fluttermanes as well?
It really is a balancing act. Arcanine does switch in for Oliver, taking those toxic spikes and getting poisoned. Intimidating Palafin, which it does not appreciate being a physical attacker. Fluttermane doesn't mind it so much. As a Terra comes out from Thomas, and he is going to be terrestrializing his Fluttermane into the Steel type, so that will help its defenses for the most part. It's not so much an offensive Terra Fluttermane into the Steel type, and Oliver responds with a Terra as well, so a terrestrializing on the same turn for both of these trainers, and he is going for that Water type terrestrialization on his Fluttermane. So will it be able to survive a Jet Punch? If that is indeed what Thomas has gone for, it's going to be a close call, and maybe he chose the Water type Terra for this reason, but in fact the Jet Punch goes into the Arcanine as Dazzling Gleam comes out. Both Pokemon on very low health on Oliver's side of the field, but it's infinitely more than 0 HP as Fluttermane is able to survive, respond with a Shadow Ball, taking down Palafin to about 1/3 of its health, but then Poison takes out the Fluttermane and it goes down, so the Terra is already up for Oliver. Did he get too much out of his Terra? The Jet Punch wasn't going into that slot, so it's arguable as Arcanine takes its turn of Poison as well.
And it's only one turn away from being knocked out here to that Poison. The Glimmora still coming into play, getting that Poison very, very early on that Fluttermane, and now it is going to be KO'd. There goes the massive damage from that Spec Shadow Ball, and now you've got to still find a way to knock out this Palafin. You can't really go for Sucker Punches because Jet Punch has a higher priority, or the same priority, but higher speed on the Palafin, so it would out-prioritize the opposing Sucker Punch. Not this Extreme Speed, though.
No, Extreme Speed, in fact, goes into the Steel type Fluttermane. It is a critical hit, and we'll see if it proves to be crucial. Kingambit able to take that Jet Punch quite nicely. As a Dazzling Gleam comes out, it's enough to pick up the Arcanine. Kingambit is able to survive, but since Palafin has access to that Jet Punch, it's not a good spot for this Kingambit. As Assurance doubles up onto Fluttermane, it does pick up the knockout, but seems like Kingambit might be in an awkward position. It comes down to Sucker Punch and Jet Punch.
Yeah, Jet Punch is definitely going to be faster than the opposing Sucker Punch on the Kingambit, so it will just be one more Jet Punch, and that will be the first game for Thomas. So very, very nicely positioned across that game. The Glimmora still showing why it is a very good lead with the bulk on the Assault Vest, allowing room for the Mortal Spin, and just getting those Poisons. The Poisons were very impactful in that game because it meant that the Fluttermane on Oliver's side of the field was taken care of without having to be targeted really at all by the Jet Punch. So that was just a wasted Terra. The Arcanine was put so low with the Poison as well, that would have been able to KO itself after the Poison. So yeah, really, really good showing for that Glimmora. Able to set the position to clean up in that endgame with the Palafin and the Fluttermane.
A great showing for Glimmora, and you never want to start a match with your Pokemon being put to sleep, but that's exactly what Thomas had to deal with, and he played around that so very well. And going into the next game, I mean, personally, I'd love to see more coming out from that Corviknight, but of course in that game one, it wasn't really able to get much off at all.
No, not really. It just came in on the sleep. Something had to go to sleep on that turn. It could have been the Fluttermane, but Corviknight was definitely the better choice there because it wasn't needed at all in the match to be able to pick up the wins. So letting that go to sleep was very good for Thomas because something did need to. It was sacrificing the first few turns. Okay, I'm going to take the sleep from the spores from the Brute Bonnet. There's nothing I can do to stop it. I could go for a Sludge Bomb. That's not enough. So it's better that I get this Poison and just wait a couple of turns. It doesn't matter that I'm asleep. You're poisoned. You're still taking damage. So being able to deal with the Brute Bonnets quickly might be something that Thomas would be considering as well, to be able to stop those spores. Oliver still positioned it very well with the lead. The Brute Bonnet was in a good position to be able to get the spores, but allowing the Poison to be able to be hit on both Pokemon may not be what Oliver is looking for into this game 2. The only real way to stop that would probably be just leading with the Kingambit. That would be a very good lead into the Glimmora. We don't yet know if the Iron Head is strong enough to KO the Glimmora because it did get that critical hit, so we'll have to find out if that happens again in these future games. But that would be the only Pokemon that would be immune to that Poison and could be led into that Glimmora.
It would indeed. It's Poison. We were talking about it yesterday, how fascinating it is to see Poison, the status condition, coming to the fore in VGC now, something we haven't seen so much before. As we get the leads, and for Thomas, it is the Glamora and Palafin again, and for Oliver, it's the Brute Bonnet and the Fluttermane again.
Yeah, so very much a repeat of the previous game. Again, there's nothing stopping this ball. But we saw that Thomas was perfectly content with that. Going for the Protect on the Palafin on that first turn, not doing any of the damage it needed to, just switching out afterwards, playing it a little bit slow in the beginning. That tends to be what you need to do with Palafin, because you've got no real damage coming out in its 0 form, so you have to just wait a couple turns, get the position, and then be able to do the massive damage with the hero. And Glamora seems to be allowing that very, very nicely. It will go to sleep, for sure. Like, the Spore is guaranteed into that slot. There's nothing that can be done about it because the Assault Vest you can't protect, and you don't have enough damage output on the field with just 0 Palafin and Glamora to be able to KO the Brute Bonnet this turn. But that seems okay, and we've seen that Thomas was okay with that in the previous game, and the game plan ended up working out perfectly well.
It did. Palafin is withdrawing for Thomas in favor of the Pokemon coming in, which is the Corviknight. Here it is again. So this time going for the hard switch on the Palafin, not to protect. Shadow Ball coming straight into that slot. So Corviknight not feeling the most welcome, brought down to just under half of its health there. But of course, the Corviknight's Berry is activated, making it look somewhat healthier. Mortal Spin coming out again from Glamora, poisoning both Brute Bonnet and the Fluttermane. And that damage is going to keep racking up, as we saw in the previous game. Super effective hit, but it's the point of this move is not so much to deal damage. And Spore coming straight out into the Glamora, so no more shenanigans from that Pokemon for the next turn at least.
So a couple of change up for both players. Locking into Shadow Ball makes a lot of sense rather than the Moonblast, because the Corviknight switching in means that Fairy would not be the move of choice you want to go for into the Poison, Glamora and the Steel Corviknight, so doing some very nice damage. Just a little bit too much, because you'd have preferred not to activate that Citrus Berry and then potentially get the KO, but doing exactly half means that the Corviknight is definitely out of range of the Shadow Ball, and actually a really nice switch from Thomas on the turn 1 rather than Protect and switch, because now, on the first turn previously, the Glamora was already asleep. You definitely get to go for a Spore into the switching in Corviknight. Now, it's switched in already, it can go for an attack first before it's put to sleep.
It can, and we see the Terror coming out from Oliver, which is going into Brute Bonnet, and this Brute Bonnet is going to become the Water type, so changing its defenses there very nicely, so it can try and stick around for as long as it can. As another Shadow Ball comes out from Fluttermane, going into Glamora and dealing respectable damage. Glamora left with just above half its health, but it does take a special defense drop, so one more of those would be enough for the knockout. Glamora takes its mandatory turn of sleep as Corviknight goes to this wonderful roost, so it's able to heal right back up to full HP going into the next turn. But another Spore comes out from Brute Bonnet, and it's put right to sleep. So at least it got that roost off before that happened. Yeah,
absolutely. It was a potential to go for just a Brave Bird into the Fluttermane. That would have done some very good damage, or a Tailwind, so that when your Pokemon do eventually wake up, you are outspeeding the opposing Fluttermane. But quite a nice defensive Terror typing on the Brute Bonnet to take on the Corviknight and Glamora, but not impactful that turn, so not entirely necessary, and maybe a little bit trigger happy with that Water Terror typing. Maybe expecting the Brave Bird to go into the Brute Bonnets. It would have been very close if that was enough to pick up the KO after all of that Poison Chip, but now you got both Pokemon to sleep, you got a special defense drop on the Glamora. That might be very, very important indeed, because that could have put the Glamora into range of just the regular Shadow Ball now, rather than having to rely on going for Sucker Punch to get the extra damage and then the Shadow Ball to follow up the KO into Glamora. Because if you have to go for Sucker Punch, that activates the Toxic Debris. Shadow Ball gets around that, and the fact that it might be able to pick up the KO after that special defense drop now could be very, very big indeed to stop any future poisons for the Pokemon that's waiting in the back for Oliver.
Yes, damage perhaps able to be spread as another Shadow Ball comes out from the Fluttermane, and it is enough to pick up that Glamora with its special defense at -1. So it goes down without providing half as much as it was able to in the previous game. Corviknight takes a turn of sleep. Brute Bonnet is able to go for a crunch into the slot as the Fluttermane takes a little bit of chip from Poison, as does Brute Bonnet.
Yeah, it's a good showing for Crunch on the Brute Bonnet at this point, because Sucker Punch is not guaranteed. If the Corviknight's just going for Tailwind or Roost while it's sleeping, Sucker Punch would be useless, and the Grass moves would really not do much damage to Corviknight at all. So Crunch is definitely the way to go in regards to Brute Bonnet facing down this Corviknight, because that's actually very respectable damage indeed. Might even put it in range of a Shadow Ball and another attack from the Brute Bonnet. So really, really nice choice there for the Brute Bonnet. But now you can switch in your Palafin that's been waiting in the back now. It is going to be in its hero form when it joins the field. You can always always bring in the Fluttermane as well that was assumedly in the back, and it is, because it did join the field now. So it's going to be the same 4 Pokemon that was brought to this match for Thomas. We need to see if the Fluttermane is going to be able to outspeed the opposing Fluttermanes as well, if there's going to be a defensive Terra typing on the Fluttermane. You still have that access to that on Thomas' side of the field. You don't have it on Oliver's side of the field. You have committed your Terra on the Brute Bonnet, so there's no opportunity to defensively Terra with the Fluttermane. If you take a Shadow Ball with that, that is going to be the KO.
It will be the KO. It's a super effective ghost type attack. Of course, these ghosts are super effective against each other as we get into this next turn. And Fluttermane switches out for Oliver in favor of the King Gambit coming in. So the one Pokemon that's resistant to poison, even though the Glimmora is now down as the Moonblast is able to pick up the knockout on Brute Bonnet, and it goes down. Oliver's Terror is over for this particular game. King Gambit has joined the field in time for Corviknight to wake up and go for another roost. And of course, now it can't be spoiled because the Brute Bonnet has gone down. So the Corviknight back up to full HP as Oliver is able to swap in his Iron Bundle, a change up from the previous game.
Yeah, absolutely. Going to be able to get some extra speed control going here very nicely, and be able to switch in without any of the poisons as well, because the Glimmora was taken care of by those special attacks. So very nice position for it here. And be able to maybe go for an Icy Wind to get the speed control. Might be able to on-call that Corviknight into Roost, because it hasn't been going on the offensive yet. It hasn't even set up a Tailwind. It's just been content to just stay on the field for full HP. You have the opportunity to go for body presses, because you are going to be super effective into both the Iron Bundle and the King Gambit. Very effective into the King Gambit, for sure. But the fact that the Iron Bundle has joined the field now puts that Corviknight into a little bit of a precarious position, because you can just lock it in into the Roost with the Encore and ignore it for the rest of the game. And you've got the potential KO into this opposing Fluttermane with an Iron Head as well. Obviously, you've got to contend with the fact that the Fluttermane still could go for a defensive Terror and then take on that Iron Head a lot better. But going for an Iron Head into the Steel type might put it in range of Sucker Punch afterwards, which might be awkward indeed.
And we do see this marvellous play coming out from Oliver. An encore from Iron Bundle onto the Corviknight, a move that's been picking up on Iron Bundle recently. As a Moonblast comes out, deals roughly half damage to the King Gambit, takes a special attack drop, but of course that activates the Defiant ability, so it gets a double boost to its physical attack. Iron Head coming out from King Gambit into the Fluttermane, which is of course easily enough to pick up the knockout, as we saw the Roost having to be opted for again by the Corviknight, which of course is useless in this position where it has full HP.
Yeah, I don't think that a defensive Terror type would have really helped the Fluttermane there, because it did get the special attack drop on the King Gambit. That's really not what you want to see at all, because that gives a free +2 into its attack. And now this King Gambit is going to be a massive threat. Maybe the Jet Punch from the Palafin is going to be able to pick up the KO on the King Gambit. It's unlikely to be able to at this. But you do have access to your Terra still, so you can go for the Terra Water, and that extra little bit of damage might be enough to be able to pick up the knockout on the King Gambit. But you do need to focus on it, because it's now such a threat thanks to that Defiant activating. But if you do that, you're ignoring the Unbundle that's probably going to be able to knock out this Palafin into hits with the Freeze Dry, and it's going to be able to take on the Palafin very well, because the Wave Crashes don't matter, the Jet Punches don't matter, and then you can just go for Encores all with the time into the opposing Corviknight as well, so Iron Bundle is in a fantastic position.
Encore, such a threatening move, as we see the Freeze Dry going into the Palafin, but Palafin is able to protect itself from any damage this turn. Corviknight going for another pitiful little Roost, hoping that Encore will end soon. Assurance coming out, trying to double up into the Palafin, ensure the clean knockout, but of course Palafin protected. So a really good call there from Thomas to protect his Palafin.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to waste a turn in the Encore, so that when the Encore ends on the opposing Corviknight, you've got to make an awkward choice. Do you still Encore back into Roost, or do you target down the Palafin? So wasting that extra turn, really, really nice for Thomas. Wasn't too much else to be done, because you do need really the Corviknight to take on the Iron Bundle. Even Wave Crash, as strong as it is from Palafin, won't do too much to this Iron Bundle, so you've got to rely on the Corviknight. That means you've got to somehow break free of the Encore, because going for all those Roosts has come back to bite Thomas a little bit, because you can't go for the offensive moves. Body Press would be fantastic in this position. It would KO the King Gambit. It'd probably 2-hit KO the Iron Bundle, but you can't go for it because you're locked into it with Encore.
You are locked into it with Encore, and of course Thomas is not able to switch to reset that, as his Palafin goes for the Terror into the Water type, massively boosting the damage that it can deal with its Water type moves. Jet Punch, indeed, coming out from Palafin, and it's going into this King Gambit. It's not enough for the knockout. King Gambit survives on 2 HP. Freeze Dry coming out from Iron Bundle into the Palafin, brings it down to about a third of its health. Corviknight just roosting away. I'm so sorry, Corviknight, that's all you can do at the moment. King Gambit going for an assurance. That is enough for the knockout onto the Palafin. What a survival from King Gambit on that turn.
Yeah, very, very nicely trained there for sure. That should be the Encore running out on the King Gambit as well, as we do see that there. So that would have been an opportunity for now Corviknight to potentially have broken free of the Encore lock, because do you target down the Palafin with your freeze dry? And then if you do that, the Encore is broken. But King Gambit surviving there says, absolutely no, Palafin is going to be KO'd. You are going to be locked into Roost for the rest of this game, and that is going to be game 2 for Oliver.
Yes, locking itself into Encore and locking us into a game 3. And already you can see this caliber of the trainers we were talking about. At this stage of the competition, it really is nail-biting. It's I commend the way both of these trainers have played. Spore, of course, didn't play so much of a role in that particular game, but something that certainly did was the EV training on that King Gambit, and just going to show how that can win a battle for you, how important those EVs are. And that is, of course, one of the only things we can't see, and these players can't see in team preview, even with these open team sheets.
Yeah, absolutely. The training, the good shout out there for the fact that the training of the Pokemon is the only thing that's hidden, so that is the surprise that can come out. King Gambit there perfectly trained to survive that Jet Punch, even with the Terra Water. Like, I was very skeptical that just a regular Jet Punch would do it, and I was thinking, yes, Terra Water, that will push it over the edge, but just a slight extra bulky on the King Gambit, allowing it to survive there. Very nice, and definitely sealing up the game. I think the switch to Iron Bundle over the Arcanine was a very, very strong adjustment indeed, because you took care of the Glamora pretty safely in those first few turns, and you did it without having to activate the Toxic Debris. There was obviously the special defense drop that allowed that to happen, because you can just go for 2 Shadow Balls for the KO rather than 2 Shadow Balls and a Sucker Punch that would have activated it. I don't think that would have been too impactful overall, looking at the board state in the end. Even if the Iron Bundle had been poisoned, it wasn't touched at all in the game. So even if it took 2-3 rounds of poison, it would have still been able to survive and do what it needed in regards to the Encore and the Corviknight, in regards to freeze dry and the Palafin, if the King Gambit would have been KO'd. So yeah, it was a really, really nice adjustment there to take on what was waiting in the back. Because as soon as you've taken care of Glamora, that frees up Iron Bundle a lot.
It's a fantastic adjustment. It's interesting to see on Oliver's side of the field that he doesn't have any poison Pokemon, so he wouldn't be able to soak up those toxic spikes. Something has to be poisoned, apart from that King Gambit, which is, of course, immune to poison, being a steel type, as we get into this really exciting Game 3. Which way is it going to be? Both of these trainers so evenly matched, as it's Palafin and Glamora for Thomas, and it's Fluttermane and Brute Bonnet for Oliver again.
Yep, so still relying on the same leads for both of these Pokemon. Fluttermane is still going to be able to threaten massive damage with its Shadow Balls. Going to be choosing to lock into that rather than the Fairy-type moves because of the potential of the Corviknight switch in. But we're still in exactly the same position. You're going to be able to get the poisons guaranteed with the Mortal Spin. You're going to be able to support the Glamora pretty much guaranteed as well. So both trainers are opting for pretty much the same strategies. It seems they're content with allowing the poisons, content with allowing the sleep as well. So just getting those status conditions on the field and then adjusting from there. We're still seeing the same switch up from that game 2. Palafin immediately switching out.
Switching out for Palafin, hoping to come back in as its hero form as Corviknight comes in once again for Thomas. Will it be able to provide more this game? Let's hope so, as Shadow Ball goes into that slot and brings Corviknight down to just below half of its health, but Fluttermane is able to eat up a special defense drop thanks to that wonderful mirror armor ability. Corviknight able to heal up some health thanks to its Citrus Berry. Mortal Spin once again coming out from Glamora into Fluttermane and Brute Bonnet. So both of these Pokemon are going to be poisoned, and that damage will be racking up, chipping away over the course of the game. Brute Bonnet, on the other hand, responds with a Spore, and Glamora once again goes to sleep. A very tired Glamora over the course of all 3 of these games.
Yeah, but it doesn't really need to do so much. The point of Glamora on this team is it seems to just get the poisons on all the Pokemon, because once you got that going, extra chip damage is going to be happening every turn, whether that's getting the Mortal Spin on that first turn, whether that's getting the Toxic Debris set up for the Pokemon waiting in the back as well, because then you just start to whittle away at your opponent. We saw how much damage the poison has done over the course of this set already, and it's still going to continue to do so. It's going to chip away at the Fluttermane and the Brute Bonnet. We saw a defensive Terror on Oliver's side of the field in that game 2 that didn't come into play because the Corviknight just ended up roosting, but that was actually beneficial because then you were able to lock it into Encore. But actually here it's a little bit more of a switch out. Oliver's not going on the offensive with the Shadow Ball once again. He's going to be switching out into that King Gambit.
Switching into the King Gambit, that Steel type, as we see an immediate Terror from Oliver on this turn 2 of the game, and it's going into his Brute Bonnet. So Brute Bonnet is going to become the water type now, changing up its defenses, and it's fairly early terror from Oliver. Thomas, of course, in the previous game kept it for later. Maybe we'll do so again. Glimora takes its turn of sleep, not able to do anything at the moment. Corviknight does go for a roost, but is able to at this point without that iron bundle on the field, threatening a encore. But now Corviknight goes straight to sleep thanks to a spore from Brute Bonnet. I really hope this Corviknight will be able to provide something soon, as we see Brute Bonnet taking a chip away from that poison.
Yeah, absolutely. So it seems like the strategy that Tomat is going for is just the toxic stall, because you can just go for the roosts. If you can't KO the Corviknight, it'll be able to roost back up, and then the poison will slowly whittle away to the point where you'll be able to get the KOs. So going to be able to get back to full HP once again. The Glimora has taken the turns of sleep again. You can go for the offensive damage into that Glimora, but you've got 2 physical attackers on the field at the moment. You can get the KO for sure. If you go for Iron Head and the Crunch as well, that will definitely KO the Glimora with that combination, but that would be 2 layers of toxic debris as well.
And this time, Glimora wakes up as it goes for a Sludge Bomb into Brute Bonnet. It's not enough for the knockout, but it's very respectable damage. It does, however, activate Brute Bonnet's Berry. There's another tongue twister for you as it comes back up to 2/3 of its health. Corviknight takes a mandatory turn of sleep. Kingambit going for Iron Head into the Glimora. It's not enough for the knockout, and it will lay a layer of toxic spikes onto the field. And if Oliver has to go for another physical attack, that will be another layer as Brute Bonnet goes for a crunch into Corviknight, bringing it down to about 2/3 of its health. Yeah, my goodness.
We did see in that previous game the critical hits may have been necessary in order to get that knockout on the Glimora. Very well trained, able to survive that attack very nicely indeed. So that means that if it is attacked again, that will be 2 layers of the toxic spikes afterwards. You still can go for an offensive attack with the Glimora. You're completely open to a Sucker Punch from either Pokemon at this point. Both Pokemon on Oliver's side of the field do have access to Sucker Punch, and then the other one will be able to do what it wants into the opposing slot. But then at the same time, do you switch out your Glimora in fear of the Sucker Punch? And then you can just double up into that slot with any of the other attacks as well, because that would be able to do some very, very nice damage to whatever's switching in, because this Corviknight is, again, it's just sitting on the field, but not really doing too much. It's going to be asleep, and even if it wakes up, it can go for the body presses at least, but we'll have to see if that's going to be the case on this turn.
It was indeed another physical move coming out from Kingambit. That Sucker Punch into the Glimora. There was no switch, so it was able to go off, because of course Sucker Punch only works if your opponent is preparing an attack. Another layer of toxic spikes though on the field, so bad poison status condition would affect either of Oliver's Pokemon in the back. Brute Bonnet is able to go for a crunch. Corviknight stays asleep, and Brute Bonnet takes another chip of poison.
So that Corviknight's probably in range of any of the attacks that either the Kingambit or the Brute Bonnet would want to go for at this point. But Flutter Mane joining the field going to be very, very nice here, because it's going to be able to take the knockout on the opposing Brute Bonnet, because it's taken so much damage across the course of this game already with the poison. So it should be in range of any of the attacks that the Flutter Mane would want to go for, even though it's lost its Dark typing and would have been weak to the Fairy. It's going to be neutral hits, but should still be strong enough with that choice specs. And now it's going to come down to really this: if this Corviknight wakes up, if it does, that could be a body press into this Kingambit, and there wouldn't really be too much stopping that. You can switch out into the Flutter Mane on Oliver's side of the field, expecting that, but that could be switching in on any of the attacks that the Flutter Mane on Thomas' side of the field wants to go for. If it's a Dazzling Gleam, that would do some very nice damage to the Flutter Mane that's switching in as well. The Corviknight does stay asleep. That's going to allow this Kingambit free reign to do what it wants on this turn, and that could be an Iron Head into the opposing Flutter Mane. And if you've taken care of that, that will free up your own Flutter Mane that's waiting in the back.
Absolutely, it would. Thomas is going for that Terror onto his Flutter Mane, and that, as we know, is going to be that Steel type. So able to take some attacks much better than it would have been able to previously. This Flutter Mane is now the Steel type as Kingambit. Oh, he's able to go for a Sucker Punch into it, and it's somewhat, oh my goodness, somewhat lacking physical defense. Means it's very vulnerable to that Sucker Punch, and indeed, Flutter Mane goes down before it's able to get anything off. So Thomas's Terror is completely wasted there, unfortunately, and Corviknight does wake up, thank goodness for that, as it goes for a Tailwind. And again, it's safe to do so without a threat of an Encore on the field from Iron Bundle. So Thomas's Pokemon are going to be moving faster, and Brute Bonnet, that poison is really starting to rack up now.
Yeah, absolutely. But double Sucker Punch there, really, really nice. Does not care about the Steel typing on that Glimora, the Flutter Mane at all, because if you went for the Iron Head, that would have been able to survive pretty comfortably. But yeah, now a wasted Terror completely on Thomas' side of the field. That's lost damage that you could have had from this Palafin. You could have gone for the Terror Water to get extra damage from the Wave Crashes and the Jet Punches, but now that's been lost. The Corviknight setting up the Tailwind again. on this turn, unnecessary. Maybe waiting for the Fluttermane that could be waiting in the back for Oliver's side of the field and the Iron Bundle as well. But that could have been a body press that turn.
Could have been a body press. We see a Wave Crash coming out into the Brute Bonnet. It's enough for the knockout, even though it's not very effective, but that Brute Bonnet was on such low health anyway. Brute Bonnet goes back to its Pokeball, and of course, Palafin takes the recall damage from the Wave Crash. Corviknight able to go for a Roost. Again, more safely this time. Kingambit going for an Assurance onto the Palafin. It's really good damage, and it's down low in the orange health. Iron Bundle, however, is joining the field, so that Corviknight has to be wary of being Encore locked into that Tailwind. Iron Bundle, of course, being badly poisoned thanks to those 2 layers of Toxic Spike set up earlier by the Glimora. We see its Quark Drive activating and its speed being heightened.
Yeah, and that's the key thing. The Palafin may be able to outspeed the Iron Bundle after the booster energy, depending on how it's trained. It'll be quite unlikely, though. And the Corviknight almost certainly will not be able to. And that's 2 missed opportunities to go for body press. This Kingambit's just been sitting on the field doing massive damage. The Wave Crash recoil counts as taking damage that turn, so Assurance was doubled. So really, really nice damage. And the Corviknight now can just be locked into Roost again. We saw what happened in Game 2. It just was useless on the field. And it seems like it might be the case for this Game 3 as well, because the booster energy, allowing that Iron Bundle to outspeed, doesn't care about Jet Punch at all, so that would be able to out-prioritize it at least, but does not care. Will be able to lock this Corviknight once again into Roost, and then that's not going to be any more body pressures that could have been coming out into this opposing Kingambit. And to protect on the Palafin as well, that's going to be potentially Encore locked on the next turn as well.
Oh dear, we do see the Encore coming out onto the Corviknight. Of course, if you know you're going to pick up a knockout on the opponent, you might not want to go for a Roost so that you can avoid being Encore locked. Corviknight forced to go for that Roost as another. An Assurance comes out from Kingambit, but of course Palafin protects, keeping itself safe.
Yeah, so this is looking very, very comfortable for Oliver at this point. At least for Thomas, that you've got the poison on the Iron Bundle. So if you're going to be able to stall out another 10 turns, then you'll be able to take care of it with the poison. But now you can just go for another freeze dry into the opposing Palafin. But you don't need to worry about going for an Encore at all, even though you could have done it into Protect. It was going to be in range of the freeze dry, and that would have been able to pick up the knockout. Then Corviknight is stuck roosting for the rest of the game once again. So that is going to be the match for Oliver.
Yes, Thomas recognizing that the writing is on the wall, and Oliver takes that game through, having lost Game 1. Such a mark of resilience there whenever a trainer is able to lose Game 1, but then be the victor in Games 2 and 3. Disappointment there for Thomas, but he really learned the hard way how detrimental Encore can be to any game strategy there.
Yeah, absolutely. The Iron Bundle switch up from the Arcanine, absolutely the play. Like, Arcanine did nothing for Oliver in that Game 1, and Iron Bundle did basically everything. Like, it just locked up the game completely. When it was the Fluttermane and the Glimora taken care of, you do not want to be taking on the Iron Bundle with your Palafin and your Corviknight that is not attacking. There were multiple opportunities for Corviknight to actually do damage. I think it's become a little bit of a thing that, oh, Corviknight, we're waiting for you to do something.
Yeah.
And it didn't do anything this game as well. It could have gone for body presses. The Tailwind ended up not coming into play at all because Iron Bundle just outspeeds both Pokemon. Yeah. You're going for Jet Punches with your Palafin. Tailwind doesn't come into play. Roost, you're not going to do damage. Like, you're on the field. You're not doing damage, and now you're locked into Roost, so you still can't do damage. There were multiple opportunities. Kingambit is right there. It's 4 times weak to body press. Body press would have done massive damage. It could have picked up the knockout. It had been really close. And then if you're going for the body presses, suddenly the Encore becomes not so impactful because, oh, I've got Kingambit and Iron Bundle. I want to go for body press. I don't care if you go for Encore. But if you go for Roost, now you're not doing any damage, and you're really not doing any damage if you're locked into it.
Absolutely. It was so. I was surprised in that Game 3 once Thomas was more aware of what this Encore could do, that when he knew he was going to pick up the knockout onto the Brute Bonnet, he still went for the Roost, because of course Oliver at that point has a free switch into Iron Bundle that is faster and can just go for that Encore. And I did see him at that point just sort of tossing his head back and thinking, oh no, it's done. He sort of maybe he just lost focus at that crucial moment or something, but there you go. It just goes to show the mental resilience you need to play this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And showing why Encore is so good on the Iron Bundles, it's sometimes trainers don't find space for it because there's a few other moves. Like, you do want to be ham freeze dry for sure. You definitely want freeze dry on your Iron Bundle. And then the other moves most of the time you do want. Some players do drop the Icy Wind if they just want offenses and maybe their team's a little bit slower and bulkier and you don't make use of the Icy Wind. Hydro Pump is a very strong move. It's the strongest that Iron Bundle has access to. It's incredibly unreliable, but it is the strongest that it can have access to. So players can drop that because they don't like the unreliability of the accuracy, and then that allows space for Encore. That's definitely the most common status move that Iron Bundle has access to, because you want Protect a lot of the time so you can keep it safe. And then Encore is just a fantastic move in lots of situations, and a perfect showing of it there for sure.
Absolutely perfect. What a showcase for it, and perhaps Encore will continue to pick up even more in usage after that game. But yeah, interesting that in the final two games, the Spore from Brute Bonnet wasn't so much of a factor. Oliver didn't need to rely on that win con, didn't need to rely on sleep, which is so annoying on Thomas's side of the field. We still saw it a bit, but there weren't so many turns of sleep, and of course even when the Corviknight did wake up, it wasn't able to provide much at all.
Yeah, well, it didn't provide anything in the game.
No.
It was just roost, roost, roost. Here's a tailwind, and roost, roost, roost. So, it did need to be going on the offensive a bit more. There was still definitely good offense on Thomas' side of the field. I think a very, very key turn as well was, okay, I'm going to go for the defensive terror with my Fluttermane. So now your Iron Heads will not do anything to me. I'm going to be able to take that on, and then here's a double Sucker Punch that didn't actually matter. If the Fluttermane did not terror, that's still going to be neutral hits and still do as much damage into the defensive terror of the steel. So wasting that completely, very, very nice indeed.
Yeah, it's so crucial that you get something out of your terror, especially at this stage of the competition. If you waste your terror, that's it for the game. You can't re-terror, and Fluttermane did go for that defensive typing, but of course 2 Sucker Punches is easy enough to take it out because of its lacking physical defense.
Yeah, and it was quite amusing in that game too as well to see the Moonblast drop. That's definitely not what you often want to. Oh yes, no, I got the special attack drop. That's a nice bonus. Not into King Gambit. That is definitely not the Pokemon you want to be dropping the special attack of, because it does not make use of that at all and just doubles its damage output. And then we saw how much damage it can do in that game too as well. So yeah, really, really unfortunate with the Fluttermane taking on that King Gambit. King Gambit usually takes on Fluttermane very well. You will usually win the 1v1, but definitely not if you get in the drops, and definitely not if you're double Sucker Punched as well. Yeah,
exactly. And talking of stat dropping or boosting abilities, do give a shout out to that Corviknight with the Mirror Armor. It did get a couple of Mirror Armor drops off, but again, they didn't prove to be too crucial in that game. So maybe Thomas didn't need to bring that Corviknight at all, or at least if you do, of course, you go for the Body Press. But it's a Pokemon that was brought all 3 games and didn't provide anything in any of the games.
Didn't do any damage, and the Tailwind that could surprise. Tailwind's a lovely move to go for the speed. Didn't impact that game when it went for Tailwind because the Iron Bundle was still outspeeding and you were going for Jet Punches regardless with the Palafin. So I was just waiting for a crunch defense drop on the Corviknight to reflect back the defense drop on the Brute Bonnet. That would have been quite amusing to see, but unfortunately did not quite get that. But yeah, I think maybe choosing another Pokemon rather than that Corviknight could have been something that could have been impactful in that game. You got the Roaring Moon with the safety goggles. That could be a switch in on the opposing spores that could be coming from the Brute Bonnet. You saw that there was a Fairy type move on the first game. The Moonblast would not have, you don't switch in your Roaring Moon onto that. But it was Shadow Ball for the other 2 games. Because you're, okay, now they're switching in the Corviknight. You've got Poison and Steel type. Don't lock into Fairy type move. Here is Shadow Ball instead that's still doing very respectable damage. And suddenly, if you switch in the Roaring Moon for that slot, oh, I didn't lock into my Fairy move. Now this Roaring Moon is completely free because it's going to resist the Shadow Ball. And that's also a switch into the Spores. So if there would have been a Roaring Moon waiting in the back in either Game 2 or Game 3, or at least Game 3 because you've seen, okay, you're locking the Shadow Ball now, switch in the Roaring Moon, that's a fantastic position. Because you're immune to the Spores, and Shadow Ball, you don't care. You have to switch back out, switch back in. That's 2 turns that you have to get back in to hit your Fairy move. So that might have been a very good adjustment for Thomas because that Corviknight not providing too much, Roaring Moon definitely could have done.
It definitely could have done, and it was interesting as well to see how Glimora, that was such a threat that we saw on stream yesterday, it was still providing poisons, and it was more of a threat in Game 1, but it was a good showcase of how to get around Glimora in this game, I think, with the Spores. And the Sludge Bombs weren't even able to take out the Brute Bonnet when they were super effective hits. So, yes, it's not, as with any Pokemon, it's not completely broken.
Yeah, well, it makes sense as a strategy, right? Because Palafin is definitely a late-game Pokemon. You have to lead it in its 0 form, and then switch it out and switch it back in. And that's a few turns used up so that you can get into position to do the massive damage. And while you're waiting for those turns to happen to get into that position, allowing Poison to chip away at everything to suddenly put them in range of priority Jet Punch is a very good strategy. some of the times it will work out and the opponents can do nothing. If you got poison, suddenly you're in range jet punch, suddenly you are just sorted.
Yeah.
What we saw in that game too, King Gambit surviving that just stopped that strategy completely, because that survival meant that Palafin couldn't go for any more of those jet punches, and it was just KO'd by the Assurance. So very, very nicely trained King Gambit as well.
Yeah, we've got to give a shout out to that EV training there, but we have just been informed that we are ready for our interview with the winner of our Swiss Round 1 match, or Swiss Round 10 match, Oliver Eskolin.
Welcome back,
Hello.
trainers. We're here with the interview with the winner round, Oliver. How are you feeling after that set?
I'm feeling quite good. I thought going into the match that the Glamora was definitely something quite hard to handle with. It ended up being true. Almost kind of lost that, and there was a couple misplays which me and Toma talked about as well after the game, that if we were to go the other way, the games would have been just instantly over. So
Yeah,
it's a mixed feelings. Obviously, when you don't perform as you want to, but you still win, it's kind of like a
I do
weird
get
situation.
that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be clutched, and there's also other factors involved. But there were a few things that were interesting, because, of course, your Iron Bundle has Encore, which has been proving to be very successful, as we saw in this match. How has that been going for the rest of the matches?
Well, I think Encore in general is just quite nice to, especially play around Pokemon which like to live on the field for a long time, which have Roost, some kind of stall, maybe Dondozo.
Yeah.
I also hate the fact that Hydro Pump misses. Yeah. I don't like that, so I just refuse to run it on the Iron Bundle, and it's been working pretty well, especially to the matchups where I brought it.
Honest, I respect it, because I too miss Hydro Pumps too often when I need to hit them. It was quite scary to see as well. The King Gambit surviving a Jet Punch, a Terra Water Jet Punch, without even an Intimidate from the Arcanine. I was quite surprised at that. That was some expert reviews, it seems.
Yeah, I was quite surprised at that as well. I think without any critical hits, I would have been still able to win that, because I obviously would have been able to Encore stall the Roost to PP, and then I just have more Free Strike, BP, and I think Iron Bundle would have been, I'm not quite sure. Obviously, Iron Bundle has very good defenses, and I would assume Free Strike does maybe 20 to 25% minimum, so
yeah,
I would imagine I still managed to close that game out in case of King Gambit dying there.
Yeah, exactly. It was in the moment, I was quite surprised about that as well. And now, looking at the tournament, how are you satisfied with your tournament run up till now?
Yeah, I've been very satisfied. Barring from my round 8 game where I played against Marco, I got extremely lucky in my game 3, and obviously it's a bit of a bittersweet situation again, losing because, winning because you get very lucky. So you're not like, how would I say, content with your play.
Yeah.
But other than that, I've been very, very happy with the team choice and with my play all throughout the tournament.
Very understandable. So next round is very soon as well. So I wish you luck with that. Is there anyone you would like to shout out?
Oh yeah, I'd love to shout out one of my, well, now for a year, team building friend, Guy. He's been just absolutely amazing, helping me through all the matchups. So all the love to him. I also would like to say thank you to Leo for helping with the team building stuff, and the boys, Calvin, Katz, Kanje, everybody back home cheering. Thank you so much.
That's nice to see. And with that, we are going to end this, and we are going to the next round after this. So good luck with that, and
Thank
see you trainers later as well.
Bye-bye.